The room smelled of imported orchids and old money. 12 women sat in the Bada estate's grand hall like porcelain dolls arranged for inspection, each one handpicked by Mrs. Bada herself. Daughters of prosecutors. Granddaughters of chables. A senator's niece who'd been groomed for this moment since she could walk in heels. But the throne at the head of the table remained empty. Jimmy Bada arrived 23 minutes late. The crystal chandeliers trembled as the double doors swung open. He walked in with the unhurried confidence of a man who owned time itself, charcoal suit sharp enough to cut glass, one hand buried in his pocket, the other displaying that heavy signet ring that had crushed more than one rival's windpipe. Mrs. Bada, draped in emerald silk and jade so old it predated the dynasty, didn't even look up from her tea. "You're late." "I was busy." Jimmy's eyes swept across the 12 women like a blade across silk. Perfect posture. Perfect makeup. Perfect lies wrapped in designer gowns. His mother's voice was ice. "I've selected the finest bloodlines in Seoul. Each one comes with connections that could." "No." The word dropped into the room like a stone into still water. "Excuse me?" Mrs. Bada's teacup paused halfway to her lips. Jimmy walked the length of the table slowly, his predatory gaze studying each woman's face. Miss Choi, the prosecutor's daughter, couldn't hold his stare. Miss Han, the hotel heiress, tried to smile but it cracked at the edges. By the time he reached the 12th chair, the room had forgotten how to breathe. "I said no." He turned to face his mother. "None of them." The women exchanged glances, confusion melting into humiliation. Mrs. Bada's jade earrings swayed like tiny guillotines as she leaned forward, her voice a whisper that could cut bone. "You will choose, or I will choose for you. Then you've wasted your time." Jimmy straightened his cufflinks. "Because I've already chosen." A door creaked open at the far end of the hall, the servants' entrance, where the help brought in forgotten wine glasses and cleared away the scraps. And there she was. Sena stumbled through, tattered server's uniform hanging off her shoulders, a smudge of ash streaked across her pale cheek. Her eyes found the floor immediately, the instinct of someone who'd learned to survive by staying invisible. The socialites gasped. One of them actually laughed. Mrs. Bada's face turned to stone. "Get that thing out of my..." "Her." Jimmy's voice cut through the room like thunder. "I want her." Sena's head snapped up. For the first time, those hunched shoulders straightened just an inch. "Just enough." "Give me the despised girl," Jimmy said, his cold eyes never leaving Sena's face. "Or give me no one at all." The chandeliers flickered. Somewhere in the estate, a door slammed shut like a coffin closing. And in that moment, everyone in the room knew, the golden rule of the Bada family had just been shattered. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. The Bada estate stretched across the hills of upstate New York like a fortress built from old money and older blood. Sena had scrubbed its marble floors for 3 years, always keeping her head down, always invisible. But tonight, she walked through the front entrance. Not as a servant. As something far more dangerous. The staff lined the hallway like a firing squad. Mrs. Choi, the head housekeeper who'd once made Sena sleep in the laundry room during a blizzard, stood with her lips pressed into a bloodless line. The kitchen girls who'd stolen her tips whispered behind their hands. Even Mr. Kong, the estate manager who turned blind eyes to every cruelty, couldn't meet her gaze. Jimmy stood at the top of the grand staircase, one hand in his pocket, the other gesturing her forward. "Your room is in the east wing. 3rd floor. The one with the view of the gardens." Sena knew that room. She'd cleaned it every Tuesday for 36 months. It belonged to Mrs. Bada's favorite niece before she married a shipping magnate and moved to Singapore. "Sir, That's Mrs. Choi started. Jimmy, he corrected, his eyes still on Sena. She calls me Jimmy now. And you'll address her as Miss Sena. Is that understood? The silence that followed could have shattered glass. Sena climbed the stairs slowly, feeling the weight of every stair like stones on her back. When she reached the top, Jimmy leaned close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. "Welcome home," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Then softer, "Just for her, the real show starts tomorrow." Mrs. Bada didn't appear at breakfast. Or lunch. But when the sun began its descent behind the mountains, painting the estate in shades of blood orange, she finally emerged. Sena was in the library, sitting in the library, in a chair she'd once been scolded for touching with her duster, when the door opened without a knock. Mrs. Bada moved like winter itself, all jade and ice and sharp edges. She set a leather portfolio on the table between them. "Open it." Inside was a check. 7 figures. More money than Sena's father had earned in his entire 16 years working the Bada family's West Coast operations before a bullet found him in a Los Angeles alley. "There's a car waiting," Mrs. Bada said. "It will take you to the airport. First class to anywhere you want. New identity. New life. All you have to do is walk away from whatever childish game my son is playing." Sena stared at the check. She could disappear. Start over. Become someone without ash on her cheeks or scars on her knuckles from years of hard labor. Instead, she picked up the check and tore it in half. "I'm not going anywhere." Mrs. Bada's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind those cold eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or the first whisper of fear. "You have no idea what you've just done." "I know exactly what I've done." Sena stood, her spine straightening inch by inch until she was looking Mrs. Bada almost in the eye. "And I'm going to keep doing it." The older woman left without another word, but the portfolio remained on the table like a declaration of war. That night, Sena found a dead bird on her pillow, neck snapped, wings spread in a grotesque display. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. She just wrapped it in newspaper and threw it in the trash. Jimmy found her on the terrace an hour later, staring out at the estate's sprawling darkness. "She's testing you," he said. "I know. It's going to get worse. I know that too." He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his predatory features. "Why didn't you take the money?" Sena turned to face him, and for the first time since this entire nightmare began, she let him see the anger she'd been carrying like a second skeleton beneath her skin. "Because my father bled for this family. And nobody paid him to disappear. They just made him." Jimmy took a long drag, studying her through the smoke. Then he smiled, a real one, sharp and dangerous and almost proud. "Tomorrow," he said, "your real education begins." The war room sat in the estate's north wing, behind a door that required 3 separate keys and a fingerprint scan. Sena had never been allowed past the main corridor. Now she sat at the obsidian table where the Bada family had planned everything from real estate acquisitions to political assassinations for 40 years. Jimmy spread a map of the East Coast across the table, marked with territories in red and blue. "Red is ours. Blue belongs to the Kwan family. Our oldest rivals, our most dangerous enemies, and, according to my mother, our future allies through marriage." He tapped a building in Manhattan. "The 12th woman at that dinner? Mississippi Park? Her mother runs the Kwan operations in New York." That marriage would have merged 2 empires. And now? Now we have you instead. Jimmy pulled up a chair, straddling it backward. "So we need to make you dangerous enough that they'll think twice before coming for us. Starting with the basics. Tell me what you know about our operation. Sena reached across the table and moved 3 of his markers. The Brooklyn shipyard doesn't just handle imports. You're washing money through the container manifests, shell companies registered in Delaware, all owned by subsidiaries that trace back to Mrs. Bada's jade import business. She moved another marker. The Atlantic City casino is hemorrhaging money because someone's skimming off the top. Based on the quarterly reports I used to file in your mother's office, I'd say it's your cousin Min. He has a gambling problem you're all pretending not to see. Jimmy's expression hadn't changed, but his hand had stopped moving. Sena continued. Your mother has been quietly selling off assets in California, the same territories my father used to manage. She told the council it was restructuring. But really, she's liquidating anything connected to him. Erasing evidence. Evidence of what? That's what I'm going to find out. Jimmy leaned back, studying her like she was a puzzle that had just rearranged itself. Where did you learn all this? People forget servants have ears. And eyes. And sometimes, late at night when everyone's asleep, access to unlocked filing cabinets. She met his gaze. You wanted to marry me to anger your mother. But I'm not here for your family drama. I'm here because somebody put a bullet in my father's head and called it gang violence. And I think your mother knows why. The silence stretched between them like a drawn blade. Finally, Jimmy stood. There's something you need to see. He led her down into the belly of the estate. Past the wine cellar, past the storage rooms, to a steel door that looked like it belonged in a bank vault. My grandfather built this, Jimmy said, working the combination. When he first came to America, he didn't trust banks. Didn't trust anyone. So he kept his most important secrets here. The door swung open onto darkness. Jimmy flipped a switch, and fluorescent lights buzzed to life, revealing walls covered in documents, photographs, ledgers. Decades of Bada family history preserved like specimens in formaldehyde. Sena walked slowly along the shelves, her fingers trailing over file labels. Most were in Korean, but some. She stopped. There, on the bottom shelf, barely visible behind a stack of property deeds, a cardboard box with her father's name written in faded marker. Her hands shook as she pulled it free. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to her mother, postmarked from different cities across America, each one ending the same way: keep Sena safe. Don't let her come looking for me. What I'm doing is dangerous, but it's the only way to protect our family. He was investigating something, Jimmy said quietly. Something big enough that he couldn't trust anyone. Not even his own people. Sena dug deeper and found a photograph. Her father, younger, standing beside a man she didn't recognize. They were in front of a warehouse, both smiling. She flipped it over. On the back, in her father's handwriting, J. Park. The only one who knows the truth. Who is J. Park? She whispered. Jimmy's face had gone pale. My uncle. My mother's brother. He died in a car accident 6 months before your father. Sena looked up at him, and in that moment, they both understood. It wasn't an accident, she said. No, Jimmy agreed. It wasn't. Somewhere above them, a door slammed. Footsteps echoed through the estate like a countdown. Mrs. Bada had come home early. Jimmy grabbed Sena's arm. We need to go. Now. But Sena was already pulling more files from the box, shoving them into her jacket. Not without these. Sena. She killed them. Both of them. I'm not leaving without proof. The footsteps were getting closer. Jimmy swore, grabbed half the box's contents, and they ran. They made it back to the main floor just as Mrs. Bada's voice drifted from the entrance hall. "Where is she?" "The library, ma'am," Mrs. Choi answered. Jimmy shoved Sena toward the servants' stairs. "Go. 3rd floor. Don't come out until I come for you." "What are you going to?" "Go." Sena ran, the stolen files pressed against her chest like armor, her father's photograph burning a hole through her jacket pocket. Behind her, she heard Jimmy's voice, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "Mother. You're home early. We should talk." Sena didn't sleep that night. She spread the documents across her bedroom floor like tarot cards, searching for patterns in the chaos. Bank statements. Meeting notes. Shipping manifests that didn't quite add up. And there, buried in a stack of invoices from 15 years ago, a contract for a warehouse in Los Angeles. Signed by Mrs. Bada. Witnessed by J. Park. The same warehouse from the photograph. She was still staring at it when her door opened without a knock. Jimmy slipped inside, looking like he'd been through a war. His tie was gone, his collar open, and there was a thin cut above his eyebrow that hadn't been there before. "Is she?" "She knows we were down there." He locked the door behind him. "She didn't say it, but she knows." "What did you tell her?" "That I was showing you the wine collection." "She didn't believe me." He crossed to the window, checking the grounds below. "We need to move faster. Whatever your father found, whatever got him killed, my mother's not going to wait for us to figure it out." As if summoning her with his words, a knock came at the door. Soft. Almost polite. "Miss Sena?" Mrs. Choi's voice, syrupy with false concern. "Mrs. Bada has prepared a special dinner for you. She insists you join her." Sena looked at Jimmy. He shook his head sharply. "Tell her I'm not feeling well," Sena called back. "Mrs. Bada thought you might say that." She sent up a tray. Footsteps retreated. A moment later, the service elevator dinged in the hallway. Jimmy was already moving. "Don't touch anything she sends." But when he opened the door, there was no tray. Instead, a small envelope lay on the floor. Inside was a single photograph, Sena's mother, taken recently, sitting at a cafe in Portland. She looked older, tired, but alive. Safe. On the back, in Mrs. Bada's elegant script, "She looks well. It would be a shame if something happened to her." Sena's hands crumpled the photograph. "That's it. I'm done hiding." "Sena, wait." But she was already past him, storm in her step, documents clutched in her fist. She didn't stop until she reached the dining room where Mrs. Bada sat alone at that massive table, a cup of tea steaming in front of her. "You want me gone?" Sena threw the warehouse contract onto the table. "Then you're going to have to kill me like you killed my father. And your brother. Because I'm not disappearing. Not until everyone knows what you did." Mrs. Bada didn't even glance at the document. "You have spirit. I'll give you that. Your father had it too. Right up until the end." "Why?" The word came out broken. "He was loyal. He did everything you asked. He was weak." Mrs. Bada finally looked up, and her eyes were empty as winter graves. "He found out about certain discrepancies in our operation. Money that didn't quite add up. Shipments that went missing. He thought he was protecting the family by investigating. He didn't understand that the family was protecting itself." "From what?" "From people who ask too many questions. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mrs. Bada stood slowly. You should have taken the money, child. Now it's too late for easy exits. She walked toward the door, then paused. The dinner I prepared for you? It wasn't poisoned. I don't need poison when I have patience. Sleep well, Sena. Tomorrow will be eventful. The door closed with a whisper. Sena stood there, shaking with rage or fear or both, until Jimmy's hand found her shoulder. We need to leave, he said. Tonight. I know a place. No. Sena turned to face him, and her eyes were burning. I'm tired of running. It's what she wants. What she's always wanted. Then what do you want? Sena looked at the contract on the table, her father's signature barely visible in the faded ink. I want to burn her empire to the ground. But first, I want to know what she's hiding. Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Vincent? It's me. I need you to dig up everything on the Los Angeles warehouse operation from 2009 to 2011. Everything my mother might have buried. He paused. No, don't tell her. And Vincent? Watch your back. He hung up and looked at Sena. We've got 48 hours before she makes her move. Maybe less. Then we'd better work fast. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. Rain began to fall, washing the estate clean, and somewhere in the darkness, Mrs. Bada stood at her window, watching. Planning. Waiting for her moment to strike. The basement called to Sena in her dreams. She kept seeing her father's face in the photograph, kept hearing his voice from a memory she wasn't sure was real. If something happens to me, look for the marks. I'll leave you breadcrumbs. At 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep. The estate was silent as she crept down the servants' stairs, past the kitchen where the morning staff would arrive in 2 hours, down into the belly of the building where Jimmy had shown her the vault. But she didn't go to the vault. Instead, she followed a hunch, the kind of instinct her father had tried to teach her before the world took him away. Buildings have secrets, Sena. You just have to know how to read them. The subbasement was older than the rest of the estate, built during Prohibition when the Bada family's fortune had first bloomed from bootlegging and blood. The walls were brick, the floor uneven concrete, and in the corner, hidden behind a stack of paint cans that hadn't been touched in years. A mark. Faint. Almost invisible. But there, a symbol scratched into the brick, about waist height. The same symbol her father used to draw when he played tic-tac-toe with her as a child. 3 lines intersecting at odd angles, like a star folding in on itself. Her heart hammering, Sena followed the wall, searching. 10 feet away, another mark. Then another. They led her to the far corner of the basement, to a section of wall that looked slightly different from the rest. Newer brick. Cleaner mortar. She pressed against it, and it gave. Not much. Just enough to tell her it was hollow behind. Looking for something? Sena spun around so fast she nearly fell. Vincent stood at the bottom of the stairs. Jimmy's head of security, his most trusted enforcer, the man who'd been with the family since before Jimmy was born. He held a crowbar in one hand. Relax, he said, tossing her the crowbar. If I was here to stop you, you'd already be stopped. Sena caught it, her fingers wrapping around cold metal. Why are you helping me? Because your father saved my life once. Baltimore, 2008. I was supposed to die in a warehouse fire. He pulled me out. Vincent nodded toward the wall. And because I think he left something here for you. He asked me about this basement 3 months before he died. Wanted to know if anyone ever came down here. Did you tell Mrs. Bada? I tell Mrs. Bada what she needs to know. This? He gestured at the wall. This isn't for her. Sena turned back to the brick and swung. It took 15 minutes of careful prying, but finally, a section gave way, revealing a hole just big enough for her arm. She reached inside and felt paper, wrapped in plastic. She pulled it free. Inside the plastic was a journal, her father's handwriting filling page after page. And underneath it, a ledger. The Bada ledger read the first page. A complete accounting of all family operations, 1985 to 2010. Sena's hands were shaking as she opened it. Row after row of numbers, dates, names. Shipments that didn't exist on official records. Payments to politicians, judges, police captains. Entire operations run off the books, generating millions that never appeared in the family's legitimate accounts. And there, on page 247, Los Angeles warehouse. J. Park, manager. K. Sena, assistant manager. Notes, have discovered significant discrepancy in reported versus actual shipments. Estimate $15 million diverted over 3 years. Investigating possible skim operation by. The entry ended there. The next page had been torn out. She found out they knew, Sena whispered. Vincent was reading over her shoulder. That's not just skim money. That's empire-building money. Your father and J. Park weren't just investigating. They were about to expose the biggest theft in family history. Committed by Mrs. Bada. Who else has that kind of access? That kind of protection? Vincent's jaw was tight. She's been bleeding the family dry for years, and everyone who got close to finding out died in accidents. They stood in the basement's cold darkness, the truth sitting between them like a loaded gun. Jimmy needs to see this, Sena said. Jimmy needs to be very careful about what he does with it. If his mother even suspects. A door slammed above them. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Coming fast. Vincent grabbed Sena's arm. Give me the ledger. There's a service tunnel that runs from here to the garage. I can get it out, hide it somewhere safe. How do I know I can trust you? He met her eyes. You don't. But your father did, and that's going to have to be enough. The footsteps were on the stairs now. Sena shoved the ledger into Vincent's hands. The safe house on the Upper West Side. The one Jimmy doesn't think I know about. Vincent almost smiled. Smart girl. He disappeared into the shadows just as the lights blazed on. Mrs. Choi stood at the bottom of the stairs, flanked by 2 security guards Sena didn't recognize. Mrs. Bada would like to see you, she said. Now. The study smelled like jasmine and old leather. Mrs. Bada sat behind a desk that had probably witnessed 1,000 betrayals, her hands folded like she was praying. Or passing judgment. Sit. Sena remained standing. I said sit. The temperature in the room dropped. Or I make a phone call to Portland, and your mother's morning coffee comes with a very permanent side effect. Sena sat. Mrs. Bada studied her for a long moment. You remind me of someone. My brother. Always asking questions. Always digging where he shouldn't. She opened a drawer and pulled out a photograph. J. Park, smiling, alive. He thought he could save the family from itself. Thought he could clean up our operations, make us legitimate. Noble. Foolish boy. You killed him. I protected the family. There's a difference. Mrs. Bada set the photograph down carefully, like it still mattered. The problem with people like my brother, like your father, like you think you can change the nature of what we are. You think you can shine light into dark places and call it progress. Better than rotting in the shadows. Is it? Mrs. Bada leaned forward. Let me tell you what happens when you expose family secrets, child. Empires fall. People die. Not just the guilty ones. Everyone. The cooks who feed our people. The drivers who think they're just moving cargo. The families who depend on us for protection. You want to burn me? Fine. But you'll burn them too. That's reality. Mrs. Bada stood. I didn't build this empire by being soft. I didn't survive 40 years in a world run by men by showing mercy. Every dollar I took, every corner I cut, every person I removed, it was for survival. The families. And mine. My father. Your father was going to destroy everything. Him and my soft-hearted brother. They would have given our territories to the Kwans, our operations to the feds, all in the name of doing the right thing. Her voice dripped with contempt. I did what I had to do. And I sleep just fine. Sena stood slowly, her fists clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. You're a monster. I'm a survivor. And if you were smart, you'd learn the difference. Mrs. Bada walked to the window, dismissing her. Go back to your room. Pack your things. There's a car coming for you at dawn. This time, you don't get a choice. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow's newspaper will have a very sad story about a young woman who couldn't handle the pressure of high society. Tragic suicide. These things happen. Sena was halfway to the door when Mrs. Bada spoke again. One more thing. That guard who was with you in the basement. Vincent? He's been on my payroll for 6 years. Whatever you gave him, I'll have it within the hour. The floor tilted beneath Sena's feet. Did you really think anyone in this house was loyal to you? Mrs. Bada almost sounded sad. Child, loyalty isn't given. It's bought. And I own everyone here. Sena didn't run. She walked slowly up the stairs, down the hallway, into her room. And locked the door behind her. She had maybe 3 hours before dawn. 3 hours before the car came. 3 hours to figure out if Vincent had betrayed her, if the ledger was already in Mrs. Bada's hands, if everything her father had died for was lost. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. The eagle flies at midnight. Trust the old routes. The old routes. Her father's code. The ones he used to talk about when he was teaching her about the family business, back when she was too young to understand what he really meant. Sena went to her window and looked out at the estate's sprawling grounds. The old routes meant the smuggling tunnels. The ones built during Prohibition. The ones Mrs. Bada probably didn't even remember existed. Sena grabbed her jacket, shoved her father's journal into her pocket, and opened her window. Time to see if she was her father's daughter after all. The gala was Mrs. Bada's favorite weapon, an annual event where power brokers, politicians, and syndicate leaders gathered under the pretense of charity while really negotiating territories and blood prices. This year, it was being held at the Bada estate. Which meant there were 300 witnesses when Sena collapsed. She'd made it back from the tunnels just before dawn, ledger safely hidden, Vincent's message decoded. But Mrs. Bada had been planning something bigger than exile or threats. The first sip of champagne tasted like almonds. Sena knew immediately. Her father had taught her to recognize the signs: bitter almond smell, metallic taste, the way her fingertips started tingling before the room began to spin. Cyanide. Fast-acting. Meant to look like a heart condition. She dropped the glass, stumbled backward into a waiter, and hit the marble floor hard enough to crack her vision into kaleidoscope pieces. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was Jimmy's face, white with terror, and Mrs. Bada in the corner, calmly sipping her wine. She woke up to machines beeping and Jimmy's hand wrapped around her so tightly she thought her bones might break. How? Her throat felt like sandpaper. Activated charcoal. Vincent had it ready. He suspected she'd try something tonight. Jimmy's voice was rough, like he'd been screaming. Or crying. You were dead for 43 seconds. They had to restart your heart twice. Sena tried to sit up. The room spun. Easy. You're still. The gala. Everyone saw. Everyone saw you collapse. They think it was the stress. Too much excitement for a girl from your background. His jaw clenched. My mother played the concerned future mother-in-law perfectly. She's downstairs right now, accepting sympathy. And the ledger? Safe. Vincent got it out before her people could search your room. But Sena, Jimmy leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. She's moving the timetable up. I heard her on the phone. She's calling an emergency council meeting tomorrow night. She's going to force me to choose between you and the family. So choose the family. What? Choose them. Tell her I'm too much trouble. Tell her you're done with this rebellion. Sena's hand found his face, forcing him to look at her. And then we burn her empire to the ground. Jimmy's smile was sharp as broken glass. What did you have in mind? The plan was insane. The kind of plan her father would have called brilliant suicide. They would give Mrs. Bada exactly what she wanted, Sena's disappearance. But not before they made copies of the ledger and distributed them to every major player in the syndicate. The Kwans. The Lees. The Park family. Even the federal prosecutors Mrs. Bada had spent 40 years bribing. By the time the council meeting started, everyone would know the truth. She'll kill us both, Jimmy said, but he was already making the calls. She's going to anyway. At least this way, we take her with us. They worked through the night. Vincent coordinated the distribution, using contacts that went back 3 generations. Every copy was delivered by hand, every recipient sworn to secrecy until the meeting. At dawn, Jimmy came to Sena's hospital room one last time. Vincent's going to get you out. There's a safe house in Montreal. New identity. New life. You'll be. No. Sena. I'm not running. Not this time. She grabbed his hand. My father didn't run. Your uncle didn't run. I'm not going to dishonor them by hiding while you face her alone. She'll kill you. Then I'll die knowing I fought back. Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. Then he kissed her, hard and desperate and full of things they hadn't had time to say. If we survive this, he whispered against her lips, I'm going to marry you for real. Not to anger my mother. Not to play games. For real. If we survive this, Sena whispered back, I might just say yes. The council meeting was held in the estate's grand ballroom. 50 of the most dangerous people on the East Coast, all gathered around a table that had seen more blood than a slaughterhouse floor. Mrs. Bada stood at the head, every inch the matriarch, ready to end this rebellion once and for all. We're here to discuss the future of this family, she began. My son has been distracted lately. Making choices that threaten our stability, our security, our very survival. Jimmy sat 3 seats away, his face carved from stone. So today, we vote. Either he ends this foolish engagement and accepts a proper match, Mississippi Park from the Kwan family has graciously agreed to reconsider, or he steps down as heir. The room was silent. Mrs. Bada smiled. All in favor of. The doors slammed open. Sena walked in, pale as death but steady as steel, Vincent at her side. In her hands, she carried the ledger. Before you vote, she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom like a bell, you might want to know what you're really protecting. She threw the ledger onto the table. That's a complete record of Mrs. Bada's private operations. The money she's been skimming from family business for 15 years. The territories she's been selling to the Bratvo without your knowledge. The politicians she's been bribing with your profits. The 2 men she murdered when they got too close to the truth, one of them her own brother. The room erupted. Mrs. Bada's face had gone white. Lies. All of it. She's a desperate girl trying to. Page 247, Sena said loudly. Los Angeles warehouse. $15 million diverted over 3 years. My father and J. Park discovered it. 3 months later, they were both dead. Convenient, don't you think? The Kwan representative was already flipping through pages, his expression darkening with every line. This is 30 years of theft. That's 3 decades of survival. Mrs. Bada's composure finally cracked. You think this family stayed powerful by playing fair? You think we kept our territories by being soft? I did what I had to do. You killed your own brother, Jimmy said quietly. Mrs. Bada turned to him, and for the first time, Sena saw something almost human in her eyes. Pain, maybe. Or regret. He would have destroyed us. Given everything to the authorities, ended the family line, left us vulnerable to every rival from here to California. Her voice shook. I loved him. But I loved this family more. No, Jimmy stood. You loved power. And you've been bleeding the family to keep it. He gestured to Vincent, who opened the doors. 20 federal agents walked in, led by a woman with FBI credentials and an expression that said she'd been waiting for this moment for years. Mrs. Catherine Bada, she said, you're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 40 other charges we're still cataloging. Mrs. Bada didn't resist. She simply looked at Sena, and in that moment, something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. You really are your father's daughter, she said softly. I know, Sena replied. They led Mrs. Bada away in handcuffs. The council sat in stunned silence. Finally, the Kwan representative stood. So, what happens now? Jimmy walked to the head of the table, to the seat his mother had occupied for 4 decades. Now, he said, we rebuild. Clean house. Honor the old ways while building something new. Something my uncle and Sena's father would have been proud of. He held out his hand to Sena. She took it. Together, they faced the council, the despised girl and the rebellious heir, ready to reshape an empire. 6 months later, the Bada estate had transformed. Gone were the cold marble halls and whispered threats. In their place, light. Warmth. The sound of actual laughter instead of carefully modulated political conversations. Sena stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens where she'd once pulled weeds in the freezing rain. Now those same gardens held roses she'd planted herself, blooming in shades of red and white. Mrs. Bada is requesting a visit, Vincent said from the doorway. From prison. She wants to see you. Tell her no. She said to tell you she's dying. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Sena was quiet for a long moment. Then tell her I hope she finds peace. But I'm not the one who can give it to her. Vincent nodded and left. Jimmy came out onto the balcony, wrapping his arms around her from behind. You okay? I will be. She leaned back against him. How did the council meeting go? They approved the restructuring. We're officially out of the drug trade. Focusing on legitimate businesses, real estate, imports, technology. The transition will take years, but it's happening. It's happening. He kissed her temple. Your father would be proud. So would your uncle. They stood together as the sun set over the empire they were rebuilding, brick by brick, choice by choice. Below, a car pulled up. Sena's mother stepped out, alive, safe, finally able to come home. She looked up at the balcony, saw her daughter, and smiled. Sena waved back, feeling something unlock in her chest. Something that had been frozen since the day her father died. Ready? Jimmy asked. For what? He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, not the ostentatious diamond his mother would have chosen, but a simple band engraved with the same symbol her father used to draw. 3 lines intersecting. A star folding in on itself. To make this real, he said. No games. No revenge. Just us. Sena looked at the ring, at Jimmy, at the estate spread below them like a promise. Yes, she said. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was free. The safe house smelled like dust and old secrets. Located in a forgotten corner of the Bronx, it had been purchased under 3 different shell companies, buried so deep in paperwork that even Mrs. Bada's most thorough audits had never found it. Jimmy's uncle had built it. A place to hide things that couldn't be hidden anywhere else. Sena stood in front of the wall safe while Jimmy worked the combination, numbers that corresponded to the date J. Park had first arrived in America, seeking a better life than the one waiting for him in Seoul. The safe clicked open. Inside was everything: original copies of the ledger, recorded conversations, photographs of meetings that were never supposed to be documented, wire transfer receipts showing exactly where Mrs. Bada's stolen millions had gone. But there was something else. A letter, sealed, addressed to whoever finds this. Jimmy opened it carefully. His uncle's handwriting, shaky near the end, like he'd known his time was running out. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Catherine finally made her move. I don't blame her, not really. She thinks she's protecting the family. She doesn't understand that she's become the thing we all fled Korea to escape, a tyrant who justifies cruelty with necessity. I've documented everything. The theft. The bribes. The connections to the Volkov Bratva that she's been building behind the council's back. She's not just stealing from the family, she's selling us out piece by piece to the Russians. Sena helped me compile this. Good man. Sharp mind. He understood what we were fighting for, a family that could walk in daylight again. That could be proud of its name instead of afraid of its shadow. If you've found this, finish what we started. Clean the rot. Save what's worth saving. And tell my nephew I'm sorry I couldn't protect him better. He deserved a different legacy than this. Jimmy's hands were shaking by the time he finished reading. The Bratva, Sena whispered. That's who she's been selling territories to. That's why the California operations disappeared. She's been trading our empire for their protection. Setting up a merger. Jimmy's voice was hollow. If the council finds out, they'll execute her. Old family law. Dealing with the Russians without unanimous council approval is treason. They stared at the evidence spread before them. Enough to bury Mrs. Bada 100 times over. We can't just hand this to the feds, Jimmy said. Half these documents implicate everyone on the council. We'd tear apart the entire East Coast syndicate structure. So what do we do? Jimmy pulled out his phone and made a call. I need to speak to Dmitry Volkov. Tell him it's urgent. Tell him it's about Catherine Bada's promises. Sena grabbed his arm. Are you insane? You can't. Trust me. They met in a neutral location, a Russian tea room in Brighton Beach that probably laundered more money than it served customers. Dmitry Volkov sat in the corner booth, flanked by two men whose necks were thicker than Sena's waist. He was younger than Sena expected. Mid-40s, expensive suit, eyes that had seen too much death to be impressed by threats. Jimmy Bada, he said in accented English. And the famous Sena. The girl who died and came back. You know, in my country, we have stories about people like you. They never end well. Jimmy slid a folder across the table. My mother's been making you promises. Territory. Access. A partnership that would give you a foothold in every major East Coast city. Dmitry didn't open the folder. Perhaps. She can't deliver. And why is that? Because she's about to be arrested by the FBI. And when she goes down, every deal she made goes with her. Unless, Jimmy leaned forward. Unless you help us bury her properly. Now Dmitry opened the folder. His expression didn't change as he flipped through pages, but his grip on the paper tightened incrementally. You're asking me to testify against her? I'm asking you to walk away. Cancel whatever agreement you had. In exchange, we'll make sure none of this, Jimmy gestured at the documents, ever connects back to your operations. The feds will think she was working alone. Your name stays clean. And if I refuse? Sena spoke for the first time. Then we give the FBI everything. Including the routing numbers for the accounts she opened in your name. The shell companies registered in Cyprus. The warehouse in Newark where you've been storing enough fentanyl to kill half of New Jersey. Dmitry's smile was slow and dangerous. You have steel spine, little girl. I see why Jimmy chose you. He closed the folder. But you misunderstand my position. I don't need Catherine Bada. I already have what I wanted. He pulled out his own folder. Inside were photographs, council members meeting with Russian operatives. Wire transfers. Shipping manifests. Your mother is not the only one who has been making deals. Half your council is in my pocket already. She was just the loudest about it. He slid the folder to Jimmy. So here is better deal, you take her down, you become head of family. And when you do, you honor the agreements she made. Or I release these photos, and your entire organization burns. The tea room felt smaller suddenly. Colder. Jimmy looked at the photographs. At the evidence of betrayal that went deeper than anyone had suspected. No, he said quietly. Dmitry raised an eyebrow. No? No deal. No partnership. No empire built on my family's corpse. Jimmy stood. You want a war with the Bada family? Come and take it. But you're not getting an invitation. Sena rose beside him, her hand finding his. Dmitri studied them both for a long moment. Then he laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even his guards. You know what? I believe you would fight. Stupid, but brave. He waved a hand. Go. Take down your mother. Clean your house. But remember this conversation, Jimmy Bada. Because one day, you will need friends in low places. And on that day, I hope you remember I gave you a choice. They walked out of the tea room alive, which itself felt like a victory. He's going to come for us eventually, Sena said once they were back in the car. I know. But not today. Jimmy's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. First, we end this. Then we deal with the Russians. And the council members he's bought? We burn them too. The betrayal came from the last person Sena expected. Vincent found her in the garden at dawn, his face grim. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where I just got a call from my guy at the FBI. Someone tipped them off about the safe house. They're planning a raid in 6 hours. They're going to seize everything, including the evidence we need to take down Mrs. Bada properly. Sena's blood ran cold. Who knew about the safe house? Me. You. Jimmy. And Vincent's expression darkened. I told one other person. Someone I've trusted for 20 years. Who? Before he could answer, gunfire erupted from inside the estate. Sena ran, Vincent right behind her, both of them pulling weapons from concealed holsters. The sound came from the East Wing, Jimmy's private office. They burst through the door to find Jimmy on the ground, bleeding from his shoulder, and standing over him with a gun. Mr. Kong. The estate manager. The man who'd turned a blind eye to every cruelty visited upon Sena for 3 years. I'm sorry, he said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. But Mrs. Bada pays better than loyalty. Vincent moved, but Kong was faster. The shot caught Vincent in the leg, dropping him. Sena raised her own gun, hand steady. Don't. Or what? You'll shoot me? You're not a killer, girl. You're a servant playing dress-up. Kang's smile was ugly. Mrs. Bada told me everything. You've been sneaking around, stealing documents, turning her own son against her. She's been waiting for you to make your move. And now. He never finished the sentence. Sena pulled the trigger. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, a mirror of Jimmy's wound. Kong went down screaming, his gun skittering across the floor. You're right, Sena said, her voice eerily calm. I'm not a killer. But I'm done being anyone's victim. She kicked his gun away and knelt beside Jimmy. How bad? Clean through. I'll live. He pressed his hand to the wound. But he called someone before he came in here. We have minutes, maybe. Vincent was already on his phone, barking orders. Lockdown protocols. Now. Nobody in or out. But they were too late. The estate's main gate exploded inward. Not FBI. Not police. Mrs. Bada's private security force, the ones loyal to her personally, not the family. 12 men, heavily armed, moving with military precision. She's making her play, Jimmy said, struggling to his feet. She's going to burn the estate down with us inside and blame it on a rival family. Then we need to get out. Sena helped him toward the door. There is no out. She owns the tunnels. She owns the roads. She's been planning this since the day I chose you at that dinner. Jimmy's laugh was bitter. I walked right into her trap. Vincent limped to the window. The FBI will be here in 5 hours. If we can hold out, we won't last 5 minutes against her kill squad. Sena looked around the office, at the mahogany desk where Jimmy's grandfather had built an empire, at the portrait of the family on the wall, at the safe behind it that held. The panic room, she said suddenly. Jimmy blinked. What? Your grandfather built a panic room. You told me when you were explaining the estate's history. Reinforced steel, separate ventilation, enough supplies to last a week. Where is it? The library. Behind the bookcase. Jimmy's eyes widened. But it's a dead end. Once we're in there, we're trapped. Or we're safe until the FBI arrives. Sena was already moving, supporting Jimmy's weight. Vincent, can you walk? I can run if I have to. They made it to the library just as the first security team breached the main floor. Sena could hear boots on marble, the efficient chatter of tactical communication. Jimmy pulled a specific book, The Art of War, naturally, and the bookcase swung inward. The panic room was exactly what he described, small, steel-lined, provisioned for a siege. They stumbled inside, and Vincent slammed the door shut, engaging locks that would take a tank to break through. Then they waited. Outside, they could hear the security team searching, room by room. Footsteps passed the library. Paused. Moved on. Jimmy slumped against the wall, his face pale from blood loss. Sena tore strips from her shirt and bound his shoulder properly, her hands moving with the efficiency her father had taught her. Always know first aid, Sena. In our world, you can't always trust hospitals. I'm sorry, Jimmy said quietly. For what? For dragging you into this. You could have taken that first check. Could have disappeared. Instead, you're trapped in a steel box waiting to die. Sena finished tying off the bandage and sat beside him. I chose this. Nobody dragged me anywhere. Why? Why risk everything for a family that treated you like dirt? Not for the family. For my father. For your uncle. For every person your mother stepped on to build her little empire. Sena leaned her head on his shoulder. And maybe a little bit for you. He kissed the top of her head. If we survive this. When we survive this. When we survive this, I'm going to build something different. Something they would have been proud of. Vincent, watching the security feed from the panic room's hidden cameras, spoke up. They're leaving. What? Look. He tilted the screen. The security teams were retreating, moving back toward the gates. Someone called them off. The intercom in the panic room crackled to life, a feature Sena hadn't even known existed. Mrs. Bada's voice filled the small space. Very clever, using the panic room. I'd forgotten about it. My father-in-law's paranoia never did make much sense to me. She sounded almost amused. But you can't stay in there forever. And when you come out, my people will be waiting. Your people are about to be arrested, Jimmy said into the intercom. The FBI. Will find nothing. I've already moved the evidence. The safe house. Cleaned out an hour ago. The documents? Ash. Even that precious ledger, did you really think I didn't have copies? That I didn't know about my brother's little insurance policy? She laughed. I've been playing this game since before you were born, child. You never had a chance. Sena felt her heart sink. However, Mrs. Bada continued, I'm willing to offer one final deal. Sena comes out. Alone. Gets in the car waiting at the front gate. Disappears forever. In exchange, I'll let my son live. He can stay as heir, properly chastened, properly controlled, but alive. No, Jimmy said immediately. I wasn't asking you. Sena? You have 5 minutes to decide. After that, I start pumping gas into the ventilation system. Won't kill you, not immediately. But the hallucinations are supposed to be quite unpleasant. The intercom went dead. Sena stood. I'm going. Like hell you are. Jimmy tried to rise, but his wounded shoulder buckled. She'll kill you. She'll kill Vincent. She'll burn this entire estate down to cover her tracks. Sena pulled out her phone, no signal in the steel room, but she typed a message anyway, saving it as a draft. But she won't kill me. Not yet. I'm too valuable as leverage. Sena. She knelt in front of him, taking his face in her hands. Trust me. One more time. Just trust me. Vincent was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You have a plan. I have an idea. Which is close enough. She smiled grimly. My father always said the best way to beat someone who thinks they've won is to let them think they're right. Just for a little while. She stood, straightened her torn shirt, and walked to the panic room door. Wait. Vincent pulled something from his jacket, a small recording device, barely bigger than a button. Put this in your pocket. We'll hear everything. Sena took it, her hand steady despite the terror trying to claw its way up her throat. When this is over, Jimmy said, his voice rough, I'm going to marry you. Properly. With flowers and a dress and everything you deserve the first time. I'll hold you to that. She opened the door and stepped out into the library. Mrs. Bada's security team was waiting, guns drawn but not pointed. Professional. Controlled. They escorted her through the estate she'd once cleaned, past rooms where she'd been invisible, downstairs she'd scrubbed on her hands and knees. The car was a black SUV, windows tinted, engine running. Mrs. Bada sat in the back seat, looking exactly as composed as she had at that first dinner. Like she'd never doubted this outcome for a second. Get in. Sena got in. The door closed. The SUV pulled away from the estate. And Sena pressed her hand against her pocket, feeling the recorder, hoping Jimmy could hear, hoping Vincent was already making the calls she needed him to make. Because this wasn't surrender. This was the beginning of the end. The inauguration gala was being held at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, neutral ground, public enough that even Mrs. Bada had to pretend to play by the rules. The entire council would be there. Every major syndicate from Boston to Miami. Politicians, judges, business leaders, all gathered under the pretense of celebrating cultural heritage and community. Really, they were there to witness the transfer of power. Jimmy Bada officially taking control of the family operations from his mother, who would gracefully step into an advisory role. Except Sena wasn't going to let that happen. She stood in a locked room on the plaza's 3rd floor, wearing a dress Mrs. Bada had chosen, blood red lace, expensive as a small car, tailored to make her look like a proper syndicate wife. A trophy. A prize. A thing that had been won. 2 guards stood outside her door. Mrs. Bada's men, watching to make sure she didn't run. Didn't make noise. Didn't ruin the perfect picture being painted downstairs. But they hadn't checked her thoroughly. Hadn't found the phone Vincent had hidden in a bouquet of flowers delivered that morning. Hadn't seen the small flash drive taped to her thigh. The phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. In position. Give the signal. V. Sena looked at herself in the mirror. 3 years she'd been invisible in this world. 3 years of bowed head and silent compliance. Time to stand up straight. She opened the door. The guards turned, hands moving to weapons. "Mrs. Bada wants me downstairs," Sena said calmly. "The ceremony's starting in 10 minutes." It was a lie, but they didn't know that. They looked at each other, uncertain. "Call her if you want," Sena continued. "But she's going to be very angry if I'm late." One of them did call. Sena heard Mrs. Bada's voice, irritated. "Well, send her down then. I don't have time for this." They escorted her to the ballroom. It was exactly as opulent as she'd imagined: crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, tables set with china that cost more than most people's rent. The entire council sat at a raised dais, watching as Jimmy stood at a podium, reading from prepared remarks about honor and legacy and duty. He looked tired. Pale. The shoulder wound hidden under a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but Sena could see the way he favored his left side. Mrs. Bada sat to his right, wearing jade and satisfaction like armor. Sena walked down the center aisle, feeling 300 pairs of eyes track her movement. Jimmy's speech faltered when he saw her. Their eyes met, and she gave the smallest nod. "Trust me." She climbed the steps to the dais, and Mrs. Bada's smile tightened infinitesimally. "What are you?" Sena pulled the microphone from Jimmy's hands. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom, "but before we celebrate this transition of power, there's something everyone should know." Security started moving, but Jimmy held up a hand, stopping them. Mrs. Bada stood slowly. "Sena, this isn't. My name is Sena Kong. My father was Kim Kong, who managed the Los Angeles operations for 15 years before he was murdered in 2010. The official story was gang violence. Random. Tragic." The room had gone silent. But it wasn't random. My father and Jay, Park, Mrs. Bada's brother, discovered that someone was stealing from the family. $15 million over 3 years. They were killed before they could expose the truth. Mrs. Bada's face had turned to stone. "This is absurd. Guards, remove." "The evidence is in a USB drive currently being inserted into the plaza's AV system," Sena continued, talking faster now. "Vincent?" The ballroom's massive screens flickered to life. Bank statements. Wire transfers. Photographs of Mrs. Bada meeting with Dmitry Volkov. Audio recordings of phone calls discussing territory sales, bribes, operations run without council approval. And there, in the center of it all, the ledger. Every theft. Every betrayal. 40 years of corruption displayed for 300 witnesses to see. The room erupted into chaos. Council members were shouting, security was trying to reach Sena and Mrs. Bada. Mrs. Bada pulled a gun. Small. Pearl-handled. The kind of weapon that looked decorative until it punched a hole through your chest. She pointed it at Sena. "Enough." The chaos stopped instantly. "You stupid girl," Mrs. Bada said softly. "Did you really think you could destroy me with paperwork? With evidence? I've survived worse than you. I've buried better than you." "I know," Sena said. "That's why I didn't come alone." The ballroom doors burst open. FBI. NYPD. Agents in tactical gear flooding in from every entrance, weapons drawn, badges displayed. Leading them was a woman Sena had only met once, 3 days ago in a coffee shop in Queens. Special Agent Park, no relation to Jay Park, but equally dedicated to bringing down organized crime. "Catherine Bada," she called out, "drop the weapon. You're under arrest. Mrs. Bada's gun didn't waver from Sena's chest. You think they'll protect you? Half the people in this room are on my payroll, including half those agents. Maybe, Sena agreed. But the journalists outside aren't. Neither are the cameras that have been live-streaming this entire event to every major news outlet in the country. She pointed to the small cameras mounted discreetly around the ballroom, cameras that looked like security equipment but were actually broadcasting to the world. Everything you've done. Everything you've said. It's all public now. Mrs. Bada's hand shook. For the first time in Sena's memory, the matriarch looked uncertain. You've destroyed this family, she whispered. No, Jimmy said, standing beside Sena now, his hand finding hers. You did that yourself. We're just finally holding you accountable. Mrs. Bada looked at her son. At Sena. At the agents closing in from all sides. Then she lowered the gun. I did it for the family, she said quietly as they snapped handcuffs around her wrists. Everything I did was for the family. No, Sena said. You did it for yourself. There's a difference. They led Mrs. Bada away through a gauntlet of cameras and shouting reporters. She kept her head high, even in defeat, every inch the matriarch until the very end. The ballroom remained in chaos, council members arguing, agents serving warrants, journalists trying to get statements. But Sena only felt Jimmy's hand in hers, solid and real and alive. Is it over? She whispered. Not even close, he admitted. But we won tonight. That's enough. Vincent appeared beside them, limping but grinning. The feds are moving on the Volkov meeting sites. They found enough evidence to bury the Bratva's East Coast operations for the next decade. Dimitri's on a plane to Moscow as we speak. And the council? Half are already making deals. The other half are lawyering up. Either way, the old guard is finished. Vincent's expression sobered. It's going to be chaos for a while. Wars over territory. Power vacuums. A lot of people are going to try to take advantage. Let them try, Jimmy said. We'll be ready. He looked at Sena. Together. She squeezed his hand. Together. Outside, police sirens wailed into the Manhattan night, carrying the last pieces of Catherine Bada's empire away in handcuffs and evidence bags. Inside, something new was being born. Messy. Uncertain. Dangerous. But finally free. 3 months later, the Bada estate looked different in daylight. Sena stood on the balcony of what was now their bedroom, not Jimmy's, not a guest room, but a space they'd rebuilt together from the ashes of his mother's reign. The gardens below had been replanted. The staff, those who remained after the purge of Mrs. Bada's loyalists, moved with purpose instead of fear. Mrs. Choi had been offered a generous severance package and a one-way ticket to California. She'd taken it without a word. Mr. Kong was in federal prison, singing like a canary to reduce his sentence. And Mrs. Bada herself sat in a maximum security facility in upstate New York, where the only jade she wore was the state-issued jumpsuit. The cancer had been real, she had maybe a year left, according to the doctors. She'd refused all visitors except her lawyer. Sena had thought she'd feel something when she heard about the diagnosis. Satisfaction, maybe. Or vindication. Instead, she felt nothing. Just a quiet emptiness where the rage used to live. You ready? Jimmy appeared in the doorway, wearing a suit but no tie, his concession to formality for today's event. Almost. Sena was adjusting the dress she'd chosen, deep emerald, elegant but not ostentatious. A dress for a woman who no longer had anything to prove. Today was the council meeting. The first official one since the purge. Half the seats were empty, members arrested, fled, or simply vanished rather than face the reckoning. The remaining members had voted unanimously to install Jimmy as the head of the family. But that wasn't why Sena was nervous. They walked down together, past portraits of ancestors who built this empire on blood and necessity. At the entrance to the council room, Vincent waited, looking more official than Sena had ever seen him in an actual suit. "Full house," he reported. "Everyone who matters is here. Including some surprise guests." "What kind of surprises?" He smiled. "The good kind. I think." The council room doors opened. Inside, the familiar faces, the remaining council members, key lieutenants, family lawyers. But also Sena's mother. She sat in the gallery, wearing her best dress, eyes bright with tears. When she saw Sena, she stood, and Sena felt something break open in her chest. They hadn't spoken in person since before her father died. Phone calls, sure. Carefully worded texts. But not this. Not face to face. Sena crossed the room and hugged her mother like she was drowning. "I'm so proud of you," her mother whispered. "Your father would be so proud." "I know." Sena's voice cracked. "I know." Jimmy cleared his throat gently. "Whenever you're ready." Sena wiped her eyes and took her seat, not in the gallery, not as a guest, but at the table itself. In the chair that had once belonged to Jay, Park before his sister had him killed. The meeting began. They covered territory agreements with the Kwans, now a legitimate partnership instead of a hostile merger. They discussed the transition of illegal operations into legal ones, a process that would take years but was already showing promise. They reviewed the charitable foundation Jimmy had established in his uncle's name, funding community programs in neighborhoods the family had once exploited. It was boring. Technical. The kind of meeting her father had probably sat through 1,000 times. It was perfect. When it ended, the council members approached one by one to pay their respects. Some genuine. Some calculating. All recognizing that the game had changed and Sena was now a player, not a pawn. The Kwan representative, an elegant woman in her 60s who'd known Sena's father, stopped in front of her. "He would have liked what you're building here. Clean money. Honest partnerships. It's what he always wanted." "Thank you. But remember, clean money takes longer to make. And there will always be people who prefer the old ways. The fast ways." She smiled, but her eyes were serious. "Watch your back, Sena Kong. You've made enemies along with allies." "I'll remember that." After everyone left, it was just Sena, Jimmy, Vincent, and Sena's mother remaining in the vast room. "So," Jimmy said, loosening his collar. "That wasn't completely terrible." "High praise," Vincent deadpanned. Sena's mother was looking around the council room with an expression Sena couldn't quite read. "Your father sat in this room once. Did you know that? When you were just a baby. He was being promoted to West Coast manager. He called me afterward, so excited. Said he was finally making something of himself. Giving us a better life." She touched the table gently. "I was so proud. And so scared. Because I always knew, that this world takes more than it gives." "Then why didn't you stop him?" Sena asked softly. "Because it wasn't my choice to make. Just like this isn't mine." Her mother turned to her. "You've chosen this life. This fight. And I can't tell you if it's right or wrong. I can only tell you to be careful." To remember who you are beneath all of this. She pulled something from her purse, a small photograph. Sena and her father, years ago, before everything went dark. They were laughing about something, his arm around her shoulders, both of them covered in ice cream. That's who you are, her mother said. Don't lose her in all this power and politics. Promise me. Sena took the photograph, feeling tears prick her eyes again. I promise. Her mother kissed her forehead and left, Vincent escorting her to the car that would take her safely back to Portland. Alone now, Sena and Jimmy stood in the empty council room. Second thoughts, he asked. Every day. She turned to face him. But no regrets. Good. Because I have something for you. He pulled out a folder, official-looking, stamped with legal seals. What is this? The deed to your father's house in Los Angeles. The one Mrs. Bada seized after he died. I tracked it down, bought it back through 6 different shell companies. It's yours again. Free and clear. Sena opened the folder with shaking hands. There it was, the small house near Echo Park where she'd grown up. Where her father had taught her to ride a bike. Where she'd learned to make kimchi from her grandmother before she passed. I thought it was gone forever. Nothing's gone forever. Some things just take longer to come home. He took her hands. And speaking of coming home, he knelt. Sena's breath caught. I know I already proposed. In a panic room. While bleeding. Not exactly romantic. He pulled out a ring, different from the one he'd shown her before. This one had a small emerald surrounded by diamonds, delicate and fierce all at once. So I'm doing it again. Properly. Sena Kong, will you marry me? Not to anger my mother. Not to play games. But because I love you. Because you're the strongest person I've ever met. Because I want to build this new world with you. Sena pulled him to his feet. Yes. But on one condition. Name it. 5 years passed like water through fingers. The Bada name no longer whispered through dark alleys with fear, it echoed through boardrooms with respect. The syndicate Jimmy and Sena built wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Community centers where there used to be gambling dens. Scholarships where there used to be protection money. A foundation in her father's name that helped immigrant families find their footing in America. Mrs. Bada died in her cell on a Tuesday morning. No ceremony. No mourners. Just a brief mention in the papers, Catherine Bada, 71, convicted of racketeering and conspiracy. Jimmy didn't attend the funeral. Neither did Sena. But late that night, standing on their balcony overlooking the city, Sena raised a glass of her father's favorite whiskey to the stars. For everyone who didn't make it, she whispered. We're living the life you died for. Jimmy's arm wrapped around her waist, and below them, their daughter, 3 years old, named Jean after Jimmy's uncle, played with blocks in the living room, laughing at something only she understood. The despised girl had become the most powerful woman in the city. But more importantly, she'd become free. And that, Sena thought as she watched her daughter build towers just to knock them down and rebuild them stronger, was the greatest revenge of all. Thank you for following Sena's journey from the shadows to the light. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello and hear which moment resonated with you most. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you more stories of courage, revenge, and redemption. Until next time, stay strong. Stay fierce. And never let anyone make you feel small.